Rob Van Dam. What is the latest when it comes to Rob Van Dam's future? Now, of course, wrestling legend RVD, Rob Van Dam, Mr. Monday Night, Mr. Tuesday Night, Mr. Whatever night he appears on, of course, has left Impact Wrestling along with his girlfriend and on-screen partner, Katie Forbes. They left Impact Wrestling last week. It was a story that was broke last week. It was first reported by Mike Johnson of PW Insider, who first reported the news. It was later confirmed by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. The news being that the former ECW champion, WWE champion, much loved wrestling hero Rob Van Dam has left the company. Now, RVD returned to Impact Wrestling in 2019, and there he partnered with the likes of Sabu, faced the likes of the Lucha Brothers during their debut. Now, during this period of time, whilst still competing with Impact Wrestling, RVD has still been very active in competing. He's also competed for the likes of Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore, ICW, NWA. Now, of course, this wasn't his first run with Impact Wrestling. He had previously wrestled with the company back in 2010 when it was TNA, and is a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion and a former TNA X Division Champion. And Katie Forbes, this was a recent addition, really. When RVD returned to the company in 2019, Katie Forbes also joined him, would accompany RVD to the ring. They stirred up a lot of talk and a lot of controversy. Their content was very, let's say, over the top, maybe not say PG friendly, and they would often be making up before and after their matches. And Katie Forbes herself has kind of got over to the point where she's up there. Obviously, she's not Rob Van Dam level over, but people know who Katie Forbes is. People know her work. People have seen her social media. And during this run, RVD, in fact, turned heel. How could you ever turn RVD heel, right? Even though I know he was technically a heel in ECW and when he came in WWE in the first place, but RVD was the ultimate babyface. But during this run in Impact Wrestling, he became a heel, and it was refreshing to see RVD as a heel and defending his girlfriend Katie Forbes and doing the bidding of Katie Forbes. And he had feuds with the likes of Sami Callihan. Now, during their feud, RVD and Forbes were working with the company without contracts and often appearing under short-term agreements. The last time we actually saw RVD and Katie Forbes on Impact Wrestling on Access TV was not this week, but last week's episode of Impact Wrestling, where Sami Callihan finally got his hands on Katie Forbes, gave her a pile driver, and this was to really end the feud between Callihan and RVD and Katie Forbes. Of course, this started off where Callihan had interrupted Katie Forbes' calendar reveal or website reveal, and this has been ongoing for a few weeks. And I did a couple of videos about this, speculating what this feud really was, and it looks like it was a bit of filler for Sami Callihan as he was going to move into this Ken Shamrock alliance in the feud with Eddie Edwards that we're going to probably see at Bound for Glory. And it was also a way to write RVD and Katie Forbes off of television, which is why Katie Forbes ate the pile driver from Sami Callihan a couple of weeks ago. Now, it was surprising. I was quite surprised when this news came out that RVD and Katie Forbes were leaving. We hadn't really heard anything about their contracts. Like, we know that Sami Callihan's contract comes up at the end of the year. We also know that Ethan Page's Impact Wrestling contract comes up at the end of the year. We also know that Eric Young recently signed an exclusive deal. Gianna Perazzo has now signed an exclusive deal with Impact Wrestling. So usually you kind of hear more and more about the contracts when it comes to Impact Wrestling, but this RVD one kind of just came out of nowhere. It really did. So there have been rumors about RVD possibly going back to WWE. Now, RVD was interviewed on Pro Wrestling Junkies recently, and he talked about a variety of different topics, and he also spoke about and kind of dropped in, this was very, very interesting, that he has been working with WWE even when he's been under contract with Impact Wrestling. Now, that is very, very interesting for the future of Rob Van Dam. Now, obviously, during his time under contract with Impact Wrestling, he did actually appear on the Raw reunion in 2019. He appeared, he came out, didn't get physical, but came out. And a lot of people were like, isn't he under contract with Impact? And they allowed him to do it. So he doesn't mean that. He means he's currently working with them about something else. He said that he watches the WWE show when he can and would definitely consider accepting an offer if it made sense to him in terms of schedule, money, all of that sort of stuff. But he also pointed out that other than a wrestler, he's worked in other roles and can do that as well. And he's not been wrestling as frequently as he used to over the last few years. He said, quote, "I do watch them from time to time, mainly to help Katie out. I would consider anything as far as a contract goes, as long as it makes sense. It's easy for people to think of RVD as just a wrestler, but that's just something I do. For the last several years, my total time in the ring has probably been just a couple of hours, maybe 5, 10, 12 matches. He then went on to add, and this is the very interesting thing, that he started wrestling more after he joined Impact Wrestling and enjoyed having the nights off at times, but he'd said he would consider offers from WWE and AEW, and then, as I mentioned, made the very surprising announcement that he is actually working with WWE on a few projects that are yet to be announced. So the dialogue is there. The dialogue is there. He said, quote, "Since I've joined Impact, I've been wrestling a little more. I don't really look at it as, oh man, I want to go here. To be honest, I look at it as, man, I'm glad I get the night off. I watch these guys all work their asses off, and I just think I'd be so winded if I was out there. But I would consider their offers, and I'm actually going to be working with WWE on a couple of projects that haven't been mentioned yet," end quote. So the dialogue's there. He's already, if what he is saying there is true, that he is already working with WWE when it comes to projects, and when he says projects, I'm sure it's probably a couple of network things, whether it's story time or an ECW documentary, or they do these Ruthless Aggression series, anything like that, or maybe the revival of ECW back in 2006. I'm sure when he says, oh, I'm working with WWE on a few projects, it's interviews mainly for those kind of series, but who knows? Who knows? And when you're working with WWE for network shows, the dialogue is there. The dialogue is there. They have your number. They have your contact details. You're talking to them. I'm sure when RVD is working with the network, he isn't talking to Paul Levesque, Triple H, Vince McMahon, or the head of talent relations. I'm sure he's talking to the network people. They tend to be fairly separate in how they work. But as I mentioned there, the dialogue is open. So let's not rule out an RVD return just yet. Now, he also was asked during a separate appearance on the Dropkick podcast if WWE had contacted him about a possible Hall of Fame induction, which RVD said that he had not been contacted. He said, quote, "No, sir, I can definitely see it happening, but knowing how things work, I could also see it not happening, or not happening for a long time anyway. I used to think, and I'm still not sure, but you do have to retire in order to be in the Hall of Fame, and the fact I've been wrestling for Impact, that's got to be a factor too. They don't want to do too much with somebody, but who knows? Of course, it would be an honor. We'll see." So I kind of disagree with what he was saying there about having to be retired to be in the Hall of Fame. We've seen recently in the last few years that just isn't the case. Kurt Angle went in there and then started wrestling. Goldberg is in the Hall of Fame and is still wrestling for WWE. Edge, of course, he went in when he was retired, but he is now wrestling once again. Jerry Lawler, I remember his recent appearance on the Broken Skull Sessions on the WWE Network, said that when Vince McMahon said to him, "You're going to go in the Hall of Fame," he said, "I don't want to go in because I'm not retired yet." And Vince McMahon said, "Oh, don't worry, you're not retired. Just because you're in the Hall of Fame, you're not retired. You can do what you want." So I don't think it's as cut and dry as that, especially nowadays. If WWE thinks it's best for them and best for PR and can get ratings and television viewers across WrestleMania weekend or whenever they have these Hall of Fame inductions now, I think they'll do it. I think they'll do it. And of course, RVD is more than deserving to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He is a first ballot Hall of Fame talent, not for just his WWE career, but for his professional wrestling career in general. One of the most innovative and arguably one of the greatest superstars or wrestlers ever in terms of style. RVD was doing things that people do nowadays way, way before anyone else was doing them. He's a trailblazer, he's a trendsetter, and a lot of these guys nowadays do moves that RVD was doing in the 90s. So you can't understate his impact, pardon the pun, on professional wrestling. So absolutely, he's worthy of a WWE Hall of Fame induction. No doubt, no doubt. Now, during that interview with the Dropkick podcast, RVD was also asked, I mentioned about Hall of Fame there, when he does have plans to retire. RVD said that he had planned to wind down his career a couple of years ago, but then he signed with Impact and that changed things. He said, quote, "Sure, I've thought about that. I'm kind of surprised I'm still wrestling because I thought I knew I was winding down a couple of years ago, and then I thought I was just going to keep doing 10 to 12 matches a year. That's winding down for me, and I was thinking I would even work my way down, but then I signed with Impact, so then all of a sudden I'm doing 3 times as many matches. It's still a super great schedule, maybe like 2 or 3 days a month, something like that," end quote. But now, of course, we know that he is no longer with Impact Wrestling, so it goes from 2 or 3 days a month from 0 days a month. Regardless, wherever RVD goes next, I think it'll be his last run. You look at his age and what he's done in the business, and look, RVD was wanting to lighten his schedule, shall we say, back in, 2006, 2007, when he left WWE in the first place. He wasn't happy with the schedule then. That was 13 years ago. So he's gone to Impact these last few times because the schedule benefits him. And even when he has had these intermittent returns to WWE, when he had him, 2013 and 2014, they were all about the schedule for him at that period of time. It was all about, I'm going to come back for maybe 3 months, I'll do the WWE schedule, but I'll do it for 3 months and that's it. And he was great during that period of time, but 3 months isn't really a lot to do anything, especially in WWE land. So I do think wherever he goes next will be his last run. I thought he did a great job in Impact. I really did. I did a video, it must be a couple of months ago now, here on the channel where I spoke about RVD. It was during that match he had with Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship on an episode of Impact on Access TV, and I thought he did a great job on that. Is he the Rob Van Dam of 15 or 20 years ago? Of course he's not. Of course he isn't, and he's never going to be. But he can certainly still go. He's still Rob Van Dam. He's still a name. He's still a draw. Now, I suppose the issue might be for RVD in WWE might be a few issues when it comes to concussions. I remember reading a story a couple of years ago where it was said that RVD wouldn't be able to sign with WWE because he couldn't pass a concussion protocol test. He got a bad concussion during an independent show several years back, and that caused apparently a partial loss of vision. Again, I don't know how true that is. It's something to consider without a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely is something to consider. And we know how historically WWE have been very, very strict when it comes to their physicals. However, a counterpoint to that, I would say, is that I think their strictness when it comes to physicals has certainly loosened over the last few years, especially for talent that is just part-time and maybe doing 1 or 2 matches. You look at the likes of Edge, Kurt Angle, Daniel Bryan. I know Daniel Bryan's not part-time, but all once upon a time, it was you can never wrestle in WWE again, you won't be cleared. Remember Kurt Angle? Kurt Angle for years during that Impact run. I would love to come back, but I'd never get cleared because of my neck. He came back and he wrestled quite a few matches. Now, he wasn't wrestling every week, but he was wrestling. So if Kurt Angle can get cleared, if Edge can get cleared, of course Edge is different, but Daniel Bryan, I mentioned concussions. If Daniel Bryan can get cleared, then why not RVD? Why not? Goldberg, we don't really know the physical condition he's in. He only has 4 or 5 minute matches. Who knows the condition that he's in? The Undertaker, you look at The Undertaker, his condition, the last few matches that he had in WWE, should he really have been passing a physical? I don't know. This is a guy who's been wrestling for like 30 years or something like that. He's got to be some wear and tear on the body to pass a physical. So I don't know. I think if they really wanted RVD back, he would pass the physical. And for better or for worse, as safe or as dangerous as that sounds, I think that's what would happen with WWE. But it's worth considering about the whole concussion thing. It really is worth considering. So I do feel like if WWE wanted to clear RVD right now, they could. Could I see RVD and Katie Forbes doing the gimmick that they were doing in Impact Wrestling in WWE? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Hell no. I mentioned about their act was very risque. It was very non-PG. I mean, at one point, right, you all remember this, at one point, they got Impact Wrestling banned from Twitch because they did a segment on Impact Wrestling that was so racy, so non-PG, that actually violated the guidelines of Twitch. So all of that sort of stuff, Katie Forbes twerking, RVD and her making out all the time, that ain't happening on PG programming. That ain't happening on network programming on Fox. Absolutely not. I mean, maybe potentially get away with it on USA on cable, but certainly not on Fox, and I don't know if they would even bother to do that on WWE TV during this PG era. I just can't see that happening. But also you have to look at it as, realistically, what does RVD offer Raw and SmackDown right now? Realistically, what does he offer? And look, I think the answer to that is he's a name, he's a WWE legend. People might be like, oh, RVD's back, that's great. But is that the best use of him if he does go back to WWE? Really? Personally, if WWE does decide to bring back RVD, I would much rather see him come to NXT as opposed to Raw and SmackDown. We've seen Rob Van Dam on Raw and SmackDown. We've seen him. We've seen him inside the WWE arena. We've seen him in those storylines for better or for worse. Rob Van Dam, along with Katie Forbes, inside the Capitol Wrestling Center under the NXT banner. Now, that is interesting. The Capital Wrestling Center does have a bit of an ECW vibe to it, right? It's got the chain fence and it's got the scaled back, gritty element of NXT to it. That interests me. I think that is interesting. He can also come in, help younger talent in NXT. And most importantly, I think the best addition of having RVD to come to NXT would be that he can help WWE compete with AEW. NXT, it's no secret, NXT loses to All Elite Wrestling Dynamite every single week on a Wednesday night. They always do. And that's not just in total viewership, that's in the demo, which is more important, regardless of how many jokes are made about it by Chris Jericho and the like. It is important. NXT loses every week. Some weeks the margining is bigger than others, but they lose every single week most of the time. And I've been saying this for a long, long time. If WWE truly wants to change this, they need to put stars on NXT. They have to. NXT and WWE, they just can't compete against draws such as Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, Cody. They can't, and that's no slight to Adam Cole, that's no slight to Finn Balor or whoever's on NXT during that period of time. They just can't compete with those names, and the reason is why is because if Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega or Cody Rhodes, if they were signed to WWE, they wouldn't be on NXT. They would go straight to Raw and SmackDown. Because they're big stars, because they're big draws. So I've been saying for, it feels like months at this point, if NXT and WWE truly want to compete with AEW on Wednesday nights, put AJ Styles on NXT, put Kevin Owens back on NXT, and there's a list of other names. If you really want NXT to challenge AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays, that's what you would do. Now, of course, that isn't going to happen, but I think someone like RVD coming to NXT is interesting. I think it's a different setting, a different environment, and it challenges AEW, and it's a great addition to NXT. Now, if RVD does come back to WWE, I think most likely he'd maybe do 1 or 2 matches on Raw or SmackDown, the Hall of Fame induction, and that's it. But who knows? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on RVD and Katie Forbes leaving Impact Wrestling? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys about Impact Wrestling here on the channel. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. Really just help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers. We're about just over 50 away from 1,000 subscribers right now, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.